Voyager went to Neptune, San Francisco earthquake flattened highways, and Russia, the U.S., France, and England all conducted nuclear tests. A year like any other. But in fact, the rise in the use of the term crisis can be located with some precision in the autumn of 1989, and it seems suspicious that it should coincide so closely with the fall of the Berlin Wall, which happened on November 9th of that year. Hoffman fell silent again, looking at Evans in a significant way, very pleased with himself. Evans said, "I'm sorry, Professor, I don't get it." Neither did we. At first, we thought the association was spurious, but it wasn't. The Berlin Wall marks the collapse of the Soviet Empire and the end of the Cold War that had lasted for half a century in the West. Another silence, another pleased look. "I'm sorry," Evans said finally. "I was 13 years old then, and..." He shrugged. "I don't see where you were leading." "I am leading to the notion of social control, Peter, to the requirement of every sovereign state to exert control over the behavior of its citizens, to keep them orderly and reasonably docile, to keep them driving on the right side of the road, or the left, as the case may be, to keep them paying taxes, and of course, we know that social control is best managed through fear." "Fear," Evans said. "Exactly. For 50 years, Western nations had maintained their citizens in a state of perpetual fear. Fear of the other side, fear of nuclear war, the communist menace, the Iron Curtain, the evil empire, and within the communist countries, the same, in reverse, fear of us. Then, suddenly, in the fall of 1989, it was all finished, gone, vanished, over. The fall of the Berlin Wall created a vacuum of fear. Nature abhors a vacuum. Something had to fill it." Evans frowned. "You're saying that environmental crises took the place of the Cold War?" "That is what the evidence shows. Of course, now we have radical fundamentalism and post-9/11 terrorism to make us afraid, and those are certainly real reasons for fear. But that is not my point. My point is, there is always a cause for fear. The cause may change over time, but the fear is always with us. Before terrorism, we feared the toxic environment. Before that, we had the communist menace. The point is, although the specific cause of our fear may change, we are never without the fear itself. Fear pervades society in all aspects, perpetually." He shifted on the concrete bench, turning away from the crowds. "Has it ever occurred to you how astonishing the culture of Western society really is? Industrialized nations provide their citizens with unprecedented safety, health, and comfort. Average lifespans increased 50% in the last century. Yet modern people live in abject fear. They are afraid of strangers, of disease, of crime, of the environment. They are afraid of the homes they live in, the food they eat, the technology that surrounds them. They are in a particular panic over things they can't even see. Germs, chemicals, additives, pollutants. They are timid, nervous, fretful, and depressed. And even more amazingly, they are convinced that the environment of the entire planet is being destroyed around them. Remarkable. Like the belief in witchcraft, it's an extraordinary delusion. A global fantasy worthy of the Middle Ages. Everything is going to hell, and we must all live in fear. Amazing. How has this worldview been instilled in everybody? Because although we imagine we live in different nations, France, Germany, Japan, the U.S., in fact, we inhabit exactly the same state, the state of fear. How has that been accomplished?" Evans said nothing. He knew it wasn't necessary. "Well, I shall tell you how," he said. In the old days, before your time, Peter, citizens of the West believed their nation-states were dominated by something called the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower warned Americans against it in the 1960s, and after 2 world wars, Europeans knew very well what it meant in their own countries. But the military-industrial complex is no longer the primary driver of society. In reality, for the last 15 years, we have been under the control of an entirely new complex, far more powerful and far more pervasive. I call it the politico-legal media complex, the PLM, and it is dedicated to promoting fear in the population under the guise of promoting safety. Safety is important. Please. Western nations are fabulously safe, yet people do not feel they are because of the PLM. And the PLM is powerful and stable precisely because it unites so many institutions of society. Politicians need fears to control the population. Lawyers need dangers to litigate and make money. The media needs scare stories to capture an audience. But together, these 3 estates are so compelling that they can go about their business even if the scare is totally groundless, if it has no basis in fact at all. For instance, consider silicone breast implants. Evans sighed, shaking his head. Breast implants? Yes, you will recall that breast implants were claimed to cause cancer and autoimmune diseases. Despite statistical evidence that this was not true, we saw high-profile news stories, high-profile lawsuits, high-profile political hearings. The manufacturer, Dow Corning, was hounded out of the business after paying $3.2 billion, and juries awarded huge cash payments to plaintiffs and their lawyers. 4 years later, definitive epidemiological studies showed, beyond a doubt, that breast implants did not cause disease. But by then, the crisis had already served its purpose, and the PLM had moved on, a ravenous machine seeking new fears, new terrors. I'm telling you, this is the way modern society works, by the constant creation of fear. And there is no countervailing force. There is no system of checks and balances, no restraint on the perpetual promotion of fear after fear after fear. Because we have freedom of speech, freedom of the press. That is the classic PLM answer. That's how they stay in business, Hoffman said. But think, if it is not all right to falsely shout fire in a crowded theater, why is it all right to shout cancer in the pages of the New Yorker, when that statement is not true? We've spent more than $25 billion to clear up the phony Powerline cancer claim. So what, you say? I could see it in your face. You're thinking, we're rich, we can afford it. It's only $25 billion. But the fact is that $25 billion is more than the total GDP of the poorest 50 nations of the world combined. Half the world's population lives on $2 a day. So that $25 billion would be enough to support 34 million people for a year. Or we could have helped all the people dying of AIDS in Africa. Instead, we piss it away on a fantasy published by a magazine whose readers take it very seriously. Trust it. It is a stupendous waste of money. In another world, it would be a criminal waste. One could easily imagine another Nuremberg trial, this time for the relentless squandering of Western wealth on trivialities, and complete with pictures of the dead babies in Africa and Asia that result.